All right, let's talk about something we all deal with: irrationality. But what if it's not all bad? Today, we're going to dig into the surprising upsides of being irrational. We'll look at the hidden forces that, make us totally overvalue that bookshelf we built ourselves, or why huge bonuses can actually make us perform worse. And yeah, we'll even get into how it shapes the way we find love. So let's get right into it. I mean, you know the feeling, right? Why is it that we keep making the same mistakes over and over again? You swear this is the week you're going to stick to the diet, and then boom, temptation hits. Or you promise yourself you'll save money, only to find yourself splurging on something you totally don't need. We love to think of ourselves as these logical, rational beings. But let's be honest, our actions, they often tell a completely different story.
And that's exactly where this really cool field called behavioral economics comes into play. See, traditional economics has this idea that we're all like perfectly logical robots, always making the best possible choice. But behavioral economics is like, hold on a second, we're human. We're driven by emotions, by our gut feelings, by all these hidden biases we don't even know we have. It's all about studying why we do the things we actually do, not what some textbook says we should do.
Okay, so to really get a feel for this, we've got to look at the story of Dan Ariely. He's one of the biggest names in this field, and his entire life's work was basically picked off by one single, absolutely life-changing event. An event that made him question everything, literally everything we assume about making rational decisions.
So when he was just 18 years old, Ariely was in this horrific explosion that left him with third-degree burns over most of his body. And for years, stuck in the hospital, he went through these unbelievably painful treatments. And he started noticing things. He saw how these irrational choices from both the patients and the doctors were kind of running the show. It all came to a head at this one critical moment. The doctors told him, look, the logical thing to do is amputate your arm. And he said no. He refused. That one decision, an act of what you might call pure irrational hope, became the spark for his entire career, trying to figure out why we defy logic so often. And you know what? Why that might not be such a bad thing after all.
Okay, so let's take this idea and apply it to our jobs. How does this whole irrationality thing play out at work? Well, let's start with a big one: money. The common wisdom is simple, right? More money equals better work. But is that really true?
I mean, just think about it for a second. In these high-stakes jobs, like on Wall Street or something, execs get these massive, huge bonuses. And the thinking behind it is pretty straightforward. Dangle this giant carrot, and they'll be driven to perform at their absolute peak. Sounds logical enough, doesn't it?
Well, turns out the reality is pretty wild. The research actually shows that for any task that needs real brain power, thinking, planning, being creative, a huge bonus can make people perform worse. Yeah, you heard that right, worse. The pressure just gets so intense that people start focusing on the money, not the task. Their focus just collapses. It's a textbook case of being overmotivated.
So what's going on here is what they call an inverse U relationship. It's pretty simple, really. A bonus does help performance, but only up to a point. Once you hit that sweet spot, that peak of the U, the pressure of an even bigger reward becomes so crushing that performance just drops off a cliff. Now, for simple manual labor, yeah, more money usually works. But for anything that requires your brain, it's way, way more complicated.
Okay, so if throwing giant piles of cash at people can backfire, what actually motivates us? Well, this leads us to another one of these super interesting quirks of our minds. We are totally, irrationally in love with the things we create ourselves.
And the perfect example for this is what's called the IKEA effect. You know what I'm talking about. You spend hours, you're wrestling with those confusing, wordless instructions, trying to build a bookshelf. It ends up a little crooked, maybe a little wobbly, but to you, it's a masterpiece. You love that thing way more than some perfect, pre-assembled one from a fancy store. Why? Because you built it. We just irrationally pump up the value of anything we put our own sweat into.
All right, we've talked about work. Now let's switch gears and talk about our personal lives. Because if there's any part of life where logic just gets thrown out the window, it's got to be love and relationships, right?
So social scientists have this fancy term for something we've all noticed: assortative mating. All it really means is that people tend to partner up with others who are on a similar level of, well, physical attractiveness. But the why behind it? That's where things get really interesting.
It's not that our idea of what's beautiful suddenly changes. Nope. It's that we adapt. If you're not a supermodel, you kind of learn pretty quickly that you might need to bring more to the table than just looks. So you start to value other things more, like, is this person funny? Are they kind? Are they smart? It's not about lowering your standards at all.
It's about expanding them. It's actually a really smart, adaptive thing to do.
And this whole idea of adapting our values really shows why online dating can feel so broken. I mean, the whole process is set up to be super logical. It's like you're shopping for a new laptop. You list out your specs, height, income, hobbies, and then you search a giant database for someone who checks all the boxes. You find a perfect match on paper, and then what? You just expect the magic to happen?
But that's the thing, isn't it? Where's the chemistry in all that? A person isn't just a list of stats on a screen. Real connection, real attraction, that's built on shared experiences. You know, going to a concert together, laughing at the same dumb joke, just figuring out how to have a real conversation. That's the stuff a database can't even begin to predict.
And okay, what about when love ends? Oh man, this is where we become masters of irrational fortune-telling. Think about Romeo. Before he even met Juliet, he was heartbroken over another girl, Rosalind. He was so dramatic, he was in the midst of endless sadness, thought he was as good as dead. He was completely convinced he'd never ever get over it.
And just like good old Romeo, we are terrible at predicting how we're going to feel in the future. We think a breakup is the end of the world, that the pain will last forever. But the reality? We have this amazing built-in ability to adapt. The research is clear on this. The actual time we spend miserable after a breakup is way, way shorter than we think it's going to be. We are just so much more resilient than we give ourselves credit for.
Okay, so we've looked at work, we've looked at love. What's the big takeaway here? What do we do with all this? How can we actually use this knowledge about our own weird, irrational brains to live a little better?
So let's wrap this all up. We've learned that massive bonuses can totally kill performance on brainy tasks. We've seen how we fall in love with our own wobbly IKEA furniture. In the world of love, we don't just settle, we smartly adapt our priorities. And when our hearts get broken, we bounce back way faster than we ever expect. So here's the bottom line. Maybe all this irrationality, maybe it isn't a bug in our system. Maybe it's a feature. It's a core part of what makes us so adaptable and so human.
Look, once you understand these hidden forces, you can start to see yourself a little more clearly. You can anticipate your own biases and maybe even use them to your advantage. So I'll just leave you with this to think about. Now that you know you're not as irrational as you thought, what's one big decision in your life, maybe at work, maybe at home, that you're going to look at in a completely different way?